Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us this evening from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Georgina Acituno. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the Banker Island Massacre. By late January 1942, it became clear that the Japanese were likely to invade Singapore. Evacuations began and continued for several weeks, with ships that carried evacuees coming under attack from Japanese aircraft and warships. On the 16th of February, a group of survivors from sunken evacuation ships congregated on Raji Beach on Banker Island. The group included British civilians and Commonwealth servicemen, as well as a party of Australian nurses who had survived the sinking of the SS Vinebrook 2 days earlier. Banker Island had been occupied by the Japanese sometime earlier, and most of the civilians left the beach to surrender. However, the 22 nurses remained behind to care for the wounded men on the beach. A party of Japanese soldiers arrived and ordered the walking wounded around the headland, where they were shot and bayoneted. The soldiers returned and ordered the nurses and remaining civilian women into the surf, where they were mown down by machine gun fire. The stretcher cases on the beach were then also summarily executed. One nurse and one soldier survived the attack. Sister Vivian Bullwinkle had been struck in the back by a bullet and lay in the surf until the Japanese left. She found a British private who had also survived the attack and tended to his wounds. The two survived for 12 days before surrendering to the Japanese. The British private died shortly afterwards. Bullwinkle survived the war in captivity, becoming one of just 24 of the 65 nurses on board the SS Vinebrook to survive the war. The nurses are commemorated on a special memorial near the spot where the survivors of the sinking of the SS Vinebrook came ashore on Banker Island. Shortly, we will tell the story of Sister Ellen Louisa Keats, who was one of the Australian nurses killed at Banker Island. This evening we are honoured to welcome General Charles Flynn, Commanding General, United States Army Pacific, accompanied by Lieutenant General Rick Burr, Chief of Army Australia, and their accompanying delegation. We also welcome Mr. Matt Anderson, Director of the Australian War Memorial. We are also honoured to welcome Group Captain Catherine Stein, Director of Defence Force Nursing, Group Captain Kathleen Pine, Director of Air Force Health, Commander Nathan Saunders, representing the Director of Navy Health, Adjunct Professor Kylie Ward, Chief Executive Officer of the Australian College of Nursing, Marilyn Gendek, representing the Australian Nurses Memorial Centre, Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch, and all who are present this evening to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Banker Island Massacre. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier.
Present, arms. Catapult body, reverse. Catapult body, rest on.
If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Catapult body, attention. Catapult body, present, arms.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult body, shoulder, arms. Catapult body, order, arms.
Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Sister Ellen Louisa Keats. Ellen Keats was born on the 1st of July 1915 to Clarence Carrington Keats and Anne Grace Keats of the Adelaide suburb of Dulwich. Her hobbies included playing the piano, and she trained as a nurse at the Adelaide Hospital, passing her examinations in 1937. On the 3rd of February 1941, Keats enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, joining the Australian Army Nursing Service. Her brothers, twins, Gilbert Thomas Keats and Donald Carrington Keats, also enlisted that year. Although Gilbert was taken prisoner at the Battle of Alamein in November 1942, both brothers survived the war. Known as Nell, Sister Keats was soon attached to the camp hospital at Wayville. In May, she embarked with the 10th Australian General Hospital to Singapore. After a move to nearby Malaya, Keats worked with the other nurses to treat the wounded and ill. In December 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and the Malayan mainland. As the enemy forces advanced, the nurses of the 10th AGH were forced to withdraw to Singapore, where they joined the 13th AGH, the only Australian hospital left in Malaya. Despite the growing tension and threat of invasion, Sister Keats' letters home remained upbeat, focusing on social events such as community singing and trips to the movies. In one of her last letters, she told her mother not to worry, because there is no need to, and don't listen to rumours, because most of them are false. Once the fall of Singapore became inevitable, most Australian personnel were evacuated from the island. Keats was one of 65 Australian nurses who left Singapore aboard the Vinabrook on the 14th of February. 2 days later, the ship was bombed by the Japanese and many lives were lost. Some of the survivors were put into lifeboats, and those who could swim made for the nearby Banker Island. Some survivors travelled to the nearest port to formally surrender to the Japanese, but Keats was among 22 Australian nurses who remained on the beach to tend to the wounded. On the morning of the 16th of February, a group of Japanese soldiers arrived and in 3 stages ordered the wounded around a headland where they were killed. The last of the survivors were ordered to walk into the sea. When the water reached their waists, the Japanese opened fire with machine guns. Of the 22 Australian nurses ordered into the sea, all but one were killed, including Nell Keats. She was 26 years old. Sister Ellen Louisa Keats is commemorated on the Singapore Memorial and on a plaque dedicated in 1947 in the Nurses' Chapel of the Royal Adelaide Hospital. Its inscription reads, "In loving memory of South Australian members of the Australian Army Nursing Service who made the supreme sacrifice, killed by Japanese, World War 1939 to 1945. Sister Keats' name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. In the photograph displayed today beside the pool of reflection, Sister Keats is on the left, beside fellow nurse, Sister Elizabeth Pyman. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sister Ellen Louisa Keats, who gave her life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age will not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
California Party, present arms. Shoulder arms.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party inwards turn. Catapult party quick arch.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We particularly appreciate your visit despite the challenges posed by COVID, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.